Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to the third panel discussion organized by the Health Practitioners Network of Friends of India, Australia. Joining me today is Dr. Saroja Srinivasan, whose career in clinical psychology spans 5 decades in Australia. She has been an academic, a contributor to India Link newspaper, and commenced Australia's first ever Tamil language school. We also have Dr. Sasikumar Gurunathan, who has undertaken 9 years of psychiatry training both in UK and Australia, and is now a GP with special interest in mental health for the last 9 years in Foster. My name is Vani. I'm a local GP who's coordinating the session today. Thank you for all registering, and we have incorporated your questions into the presentation. If you have more questions, as I said before, from our discussion, please feel free to post it in the chat. We will address them at the end. So I will begin our session with a parable where a grandfather was telling his grandson about this constant battle between the good wolf and the bad wolf within each of us. The grandson asked his grandfather, "Grandpa, which wolf wins?" The grandfather replied, "The one that you feed." So which wolf are you feeding? So evolution has been about survival of the fittest. Our ancestors survived because of our negativity bias, where we always calculate the worst possible scenario, such as being cast out of the tribe. In those days meant certain death. That is why still we dislike being slighted, rejected, or ignored. This negativity fuels our sympathetic nervous system, or as I like to call it, the stress system, which arms us to fight, flight, or freeze. In order to better understand the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, or the peace system, we will watch a short video.
No audio from the video?
No audio.
We'll work on that.
No.
No audio, yes.
Parasympathetic nervous system.
Okay, I'm going to replay it. Apparently the voice didn't come through.
Refresher with you about the sympathetic and parasympathetic aspects of the autonomic nervous system. Now, you may or may not know the sympathetic nervous system gets its name because of the Greek sim meaning with and pathos meaning feelings. So it's where we also get the word sympathy from. So the sympathetic nervous system gives you these very powerful feelings, these feelings associated with fight or flight responses, the racing heart, the knots in the stomach, strong feelings of anger and fear. Your sympathetic nervous system really, one of its main roles is to mobilize you for action. It's mobility. It mobilizes you for fight or flight responses in the presence of threat. The fight responses gives rise to these very strong feelings of anger, frustration, and so forth, and all the relatives of anger. And the flight responses give rise to kind of fear and anxiety and all the various relatives of fear. The parasympathetic nerve, para means against, and so sympathetic nervous system tends to kind of relax you. It puts you into chill out mode. Parasympathetic nervous system is often characterized as rest and digest, feed and breed. So it helps you rest and recuperate, relax and chill out. It helps you to digest your food and absorb all the nutrients from your food and metabolize well.
Thank you. So as we saw, the stress and the peace system is governed by the hypothalamus, which is a part of the brain, which in turn is governed by another 2 regions of the brain. So the first is the amygdala, okay? This is the emotional center. It's in close proximity to the hippocampus, which is our memory center. So here's where our happiness and our sadness lies, and we have an oscillation of our moods. And we are very good at remembering our emotions because it's stored rapidly into the memory right next door. So this is known as the old or reptilian brain, and because this is the brain that reptiles have, okay? Now, the second is the prefrontal cortex, known as the logic center, or the mammalian brain, which keeps the amygdala, our emotional fluctuations, under control. It is sometimes shut down by the amygdala during distressing situations, such as or reminders of distress. This is what happens when children throw temper tantrums for being refused devices, or when people road rage. So this is where the term flipping the lid comes from. So from a neuroscientific point of view, if our prefrontal cortex, located here, has mastery over the amygdala, located at the back, which in turn activates our peace system over our stress system, then we will chill out instead of burning out. Now that we've seen the neuroscience of stress, Dr. Saroja will elaborate further on what stress is and how it affects us.
Thank you, Vani. So let's briefly start having a look at some of the what is stress and what can we do about it, and where does it come from? Where it comes from, so what is stress? In engineering, this is a definition. The term stress is one of the most bandied about words I have come across in the last so many years. Everybody is stressed. I'm sure a few of you have heard a small child in a video who says, I know, mom and dad, you're feeling very angry with each other and you're arguing. I'm feeling very stressed and you're feeling very stressed. This is a 5-year-old girl. So that's where it's coming from. So where is it coming from? Originally in engineering, it was seen as the amount of force that is being placed on a particular thing, where there's a particular formula. I'm not an engineering person, so I'm not going to bore you with that. But surprisingly, when I asked an engineer what those sources are, he said that it could be from compression, tension, bending, and creep. And what I'm saying is here, this is particularly in the physical sciences, but in the psychological sense, there's much more interaction. We have all those things here. We always say, I feel a lot of tension, and when there is tension, you give in sometimes or you fight it. But it also has a different definition in psychology, and that is the wear and tear on our body and mind when there are many challenges and changes happening to us. And it depends on really our previous history, individual differences, all those sort of things. So what are some of the early warning signals? It could be an increase in non-productive habitual behaviors. For example, the non-productive one would be repetition. Something feels better when I'm stressed, so I keep doing it again and again and again. And so it becomes a habit. For example, alcohol. Good habits, on the other hand, which we'll talk about later, need a lot of practice, but it takes time, much longer than the habit that's formed with negative behaviors or non-productive behaviors, rather. It could be increase in irritability, difficulty in concentrating, social withdrawal, long spells of moodiness, lots of changes. So these are early warning signals, because you need to think about stress as not just an entity that is there or it is not there. It's always there. And if you can draw a continuum, it becomes from 0 to 100. Most of the time we are having some sort of stress, 5, 10, 15, that range, we can cope with it. So we need stress very often in our life, because that's what motivates us. When a situation is manageable, we don't see it as a stress. But when we think it is unmanageable or unpredictable or out of our control, beyond one's resources, it becomes stressful. So where does it come from? There are sources. The sources come from a number of areas, what I would call macro and micro stressors. Macro stressors are the major life changes and challenges. And keep in mind, a lot of the time, While some of them are under control, many of them are not. For example, migration depends on whether it's very stressful, depending on who makes the decision to migrate. So in a group of people like a family, there are some who make the decision and it's okay. And there are some who have no choice. And for them, it's much harder. Relationships. So you have a variety of relationships. They are very stressful too. Close, family, other influences from outside, serious illness. These are the macro stresses. The micro ones are the everyday hassles. You know, it could be difficult communication with family, disciplining children, traffic, long queues, all sorts of things. We talk about A-type behavior. Now, there also are internal and external ones. Internal is when your own expectations are there, when you put yourself under stress by wanting to do many things that may not be possible. External ones are things like peer pressure, fashion, family's expectations. So, and all, so that then we move on to thoughts. Thoughts are negative, you know, when you start using a lot of catastrophic sort of assessment of his situations. You know, it could be a minor hiccup, but you blow it into such great proportion that it becomes very stressful. The next slide, please. The next one. Okay. I'll give you an example. The physiological stresses that are there, which we have already seen in that video, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. So you have your sympathetic, which is the more negative way of reacting to something, and the parasympathetic helps you where it is more helpful. Can we just go back to the previous one, please? An example of, no, the previous one, please, thanks. The physiological, the emotions are the ones where, for example, where anger becomes an internal symptom, but also becomes externalized. So you have a combination of that. The physiological symptoms, I'll give you an example. For example, there are times when, the next one, please. Where the same situation, no, not that one, yeah. The emotional response to stresses, when a symptom, for example, a stressful symptom, which is, an example would be overweight, say, which is a stress, leads to comfort eating, which creates more stress because now it increases the weight and it becomes a vicious cycle. So what you see as a symptom of stress also becomes a source of stress very quickly. So the same situation can be both negative, create more negative and positive feelings. Because when others are involved, what is positive for you may be negative for somebody else. The behaviors, again, the negative behaviors that you can make contribute to the sources are when you or somebody else uses avoidance or escape from the situation, being very passive. And the positive ones, while being good for the individual, is really not very good for the others around. You can take time out and relax too much, and then all the stress is on somebody else. Now, if we could move to the next one. It's very, very important to be aware that when others, both in the family and friends, are showing signs of stress, you need to be there for them. As I said right in the beginning, it depends on the inner resources people have. So there's individual difference. While a lot of things can be stressful for many people, some have more inner resources than others. And that's the time when the person who is just that little bit stronger in managing the stress can be there for them. So, and the most important thing is, it's very, very important not to offer solutions straight away, because in some way what we are doing is, it's not really stressful. Why are you making such a, you're more or less implying a lot of things, and that's not what they want to hear. They want to hear that you are there for them and you're trying to understand what's happening to them. So while they may have already tried some solutions without success, you have to now show them that you care, and that's what is more important. So the next slide. What can you do about it in the early stages? Develop good mental hygiene habits. So what is mental hygiene? Learning to be proactive. Because as I keep repeating, it is how you assess it, how you appraise it, something becomes stressful. So to get to that state of mind where you're able to reason, as Dr. Vani said, get your frontal lobes working again to be reasonable, you need to develop. And so some of the activities that most of us turn to, yoga, Pilates, Tai Chi, and regular sleep. Most important thing is you can't expect the source to be there and then also expect to be relaxed. For example, if somebody who goes to bed at 1 o'clock in the night wakes up at 4 o'clock and has to be at work at 6, do you think they will be able to land there fully relaxed? No. So you need to develop good hygiene habits. And the important thing is for good hygiene habits to be formed, it takes a good 3 weeks of doing it every day or every time. Not any less. You can't do it 2 days and say, no, it doesn't work. When you talk about mentally relaxing, and also there are 4 areas in life that we have to make a balance. People often talk about balance between life and work. But rest of life is intimate relationships, social needs, and leisure needs. Really, when we say balance, it is more of, less of. You can't have all of it. This relaxation response can be learned. It is really the one that is the opposite of fight and flight. Actually, it's a technique for de-stressing. Some of the early psychological things were that, for example, as a psychologist, I often kid and say, the best prescription I can give you is to practice relaxation 3 times a day, if you can do it, at least for a few minutes. And if you're unable to self-motivate, you need to contact a professional because it is important. And also there's lots of online links and self-help strategies, many free apps, which are always there for you to initially start, but really need to keep working on it more and more to develop this. Physically active is very, very important because otherwise it's very soon leads to total apathy. And again, I will be talking about it a bit later, where we realize that these areas that I'm talking about, trying to do the early stages, are the ones that move on to more severe things later on if we don't do something about it. So you need to contact a professional if you need help. And we do, keeping in mind, we do need some challenges to motivate ourselves. No life is totally stress-free. For example, some anxiety is needed when we have to do things like where your performance is being evaluated, when you're exam or meeting a deadline. So the most important thing that I would like to take away, for you to take away, is the next one, if there is one, what you can do. Next one, no? No, okay. Take time to reflect every day, accept what can be changed, learn to cope with what is not under your control but manageable, and act on what can be changed. The take-home message is understand, be proactive, and take action. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saroja. So we'll continue with some of the more questions that you have asked. So Dr. Sasi, what are the common physical and emotional complaints of stress you see in your day-to-day life?
Well, that's a very important question because that brings the awareness of this stress topic as such, because and as you said that you can classify that as physical and emotional components. The most common things which people come to us with headaches, Sometimes that can precipitate a migraine, distress, I mean. And sometimes they have difficulty in swallowing or dry mouth or neck pains, sometimes chest pains even, and sometimes with over breathing or difficulty in breathing, you can categorize it. And some people with that AV chest or chest pain as such, and with palpitations, heart racing, sometimes difficulty in digesting. They say, I got a heartburn, things, or sometimes with diarrhea, and sometimes with increased urinations. They need to go to the toilet more frequently. And so those are some of the common things physically they present, and sometimes the tremors or sweatiness. So when we look into those things, we think of stress, but we are also have to rule out other things. But the emotional aspects of that can say that sometimes they say that same word like stress. Some people would say the word as tension, or I feel definitely worried, or too much thinking. It could be too much frustration, anger, irritability, which could be some of the common symptoms. Sometimes they say that being constantly worried about what would be happening to their family or to themselves, either in terms of financial or it could be health-related things as well. This constant worry could also be some of the features. But one thing I forgot to mention is some people come to us with constant tiredness, and tiredness feature of stress as well. Yeah, these are some common things.
Okay, so how would you differentiate that between something to do with physical illness versus mental health? How would you differentiate? What would you do?
That's why we need to do some investigations on that one, and some of the investigations which we routinely do to differentiate whether it's because coming from an organic pathology. What we mean is coming from some physical problems which is contributing to those symptoms. We do a battery of investigations. So some of the common investigations are the full blood count, which we do, and that incorporates the hemoglobin test and also the iron studies. And if hemoglobin is low, we categorize that as anemia, and anemia can be tired, and low iron can make people tired as well. So that's one thing. And also we look into the white cell count as well. The white cell count can point towards infection, which can point towards tiredness too. The other thing is thyroid function test we do normally, and that over-functioning thyroid or an underperforming thyroid cause issues with heart racing or tiredness or putting on weight. So that's very important to look into those things. And you mentioned here the vitamin D. We check the vitamin D levels as well. And so vitamin D is, especially with the Indian community and with the South Asian population, we see the vitamin D is most of the times it comes as a low value. And the vitamin D is one thing which has been recent. There's a lot of evidence pointing towards depression and tiredness and those features, so low vitamin D count. And so looking into that is very important. And sometimes we need to, because in Indian community, what we see is even if you go in the sun, your skin has difficulty in manufacturing that vitamin D. So in those conditions, you might need to take extra supplements of vitamin D, which will correct the condition. So, and in certain situations, we also tend to do the ECG, that's the heart racing we do. And I think most people would have heard of what is ECG. So mainly in people who come with symptoms of heart racing or chest pains, just to rule out, no, it's not coming from heart condition or any cardiac pathology associated.
So once you've excluded, like, and make sure there's nothing physical going on, what helpful strategies do you see in your patients that they do to manage their stress?
The stress is, so most people do have some repertoire of managing distress, and that, as you said, it's some good strategies which comes to them naturally, or some of the good strategies which we normally see where they manage the stress very well is they take a break from, if you, for that one, the awareness of the situation, the awareness of that they are going through stress is important. So common thing which I say is being aware of the situation. So first you need to be aware that you are stressed, and the second to acknowledge that you're stressed, and the third thing is to take action on that one. For example, feel stressed sitting computer for sitting in front of the computer for 30 minutes. And what we suggest is just take a stand up and walk out from that situation. And by doing that, the energy levels changes.
Right.
And that gives a significant stress relief. Now, the other important thing which people do is to concentrate or focus on your breaths. When you what I say is just focus on the air getting through your nostrils and coming out through your nostrils. And just by focusing on that, what you're doing is you come to the present. By being present, what happens is like what you pointed out earlier, your system gets activated. And while activating that sympathetic system, it is your brain is going to get flooded with a lot of serotonins or endorphins and things like that, which is a calming hormones, and some of the chemicals, serotonin gets secreted as well. So improved with experiments, and also now latest research has come with evidence of saying that there is a coordination, that coherence when you do that breathing thing between your heart, brain, and gut coherence, they say. So sounds to be very simple, the breathing techniques, but it's very profound. It gives a profound relaxing effect, because you're going, your breath will always be with you, so you don't have to look for anything else outside.
Sure.
People usually do, or which is just by listening to a music, it can bring you to the present situation. Listening to a good, nice music which you like, or talking to a friend or your colleague or your people whom you trust, and that can help you. It's not only by it relieves the stress situation, but also the certain solutions to problems there. These are some of the things, or prayer, and people pray and meditate. Prayer is also a good way of relieving your stress as well. So you're talking with, so that's a stress relieving thing. Yes.
Okay. What would you say would be the unhelpful strategies that people engage in, thinking that will help their stress?
Oh yes, that's an important thing which we need to look at. Because if we are not aware of that stress, we can easily go into that slippery pathway. Say, for example, when people feel stressed, sometimes they take up alcohol, or the alcohol by itself in minimum quantities, it's not an issue. But the problem is when you consume a lot of alcohol as an in order to catch up with the stress. Now, as Dr. Saroja pointed out, the alcohol itself can become a big problem. So then we are in some other situation rather than the stress alone. So aware of those things is important. And smoking, some people get into smoking, or some get into drugs, or people can get very irritable, and they start shouting or yelling at their spouses or children, affective relationships. Or some can get into the car and drive very fast, and have known incidents where that has involved in big accidents and things like that. So some of the unhelpful strategies. So if we can avoid those things and the helpful strategies, that would be fantastic. But the important thing is we need to be aware of that we are passing through this stressful period. Yes.
And what are the lifestyle recommendations you would make to your patients, like how to manage their stress better?
Okay, so I think Dr. Saroja has also mentioned in our presentation some of those things, and the important thing is sleep. I would focus on the sleep more, because sleep has a direct coordination to your mental health, and amount of sleep, it involves both the quantity of sleep as well as the quality of sleep. And hygiene is very important, and the nutrition, what you get into the body, is affects the way you feel. So balanced diet with enough carbohydrates, fats, and in a balanced way, carbohydrates, fat, and proteins, and not going into any special diet, but also supplementing, or not supplementing, and your food should have enough nutrients with minerals and vitamins as well, and that can be got through your adequate amount of fruits and vegetables. Things are important, and as Dr. Saroja pointed out, exercise is very important, because exercise, we all know that exercise improves physical fitness, but the mental fitness or the stress relief which we get from exercise is there's a lot of evidence for that, and any exercise for that matter. And one of the some exercises they say that can prevent depression and as well, and there's one of the evidence even say that it's very much equivalent to taking an antidepressants. So that's the value of exercise. So anything like ranging from walking to anything. So we can talk about exercise later on. And so the other things like meditation and being mindful, and the mindfulness exercise is a great practice. There are several courses on mindfulness, and there's a specific one called Mindful MBSR, which is called mindfulness-based stress reduction. Things like Tai Chi and yogas are great help as well. Yeah, those are really will be helpful for anyone. Yes.
Okay. Now, what about, when do you decide like this patient needs more than just lifestyle recommendation? You need to do more for them. What makes you decide what features?
Well, the lifestyle, the things which we discussed earlier is a fundamental thing for everyone. So everyone should these things in their life so that their life gets more balanced. But when these lives, the question which you've asked is there will be times when patients present to us with low mood or low energy for a prolonged period of time, and for at least for more than 2 weeks, or a loss of interest in things, or the interest in things which they were happy to do before, and sleep affected, and not eating much or eating too much, focus and concentrations, attention, when all these things get disturbed for a prolonged period of time. And then we have to look into the more the other side of the stress. I would see stress as stress as a spectrum, and one end of the spectrum we see as a stress, and the other end of the spectrum we see the mental illness of depression and anxiety. So it's like a traffic signal, traffic light, where stress could be, you can consider that as an orange light. And when we realize it earlier, we can prevent that orange going to that red light zone, which could be more of depression and anxiety. And so those are the red light or the danger signals which we need to look at. And sometimes when these features get more and more in patients, especially with feelings of hopelessness and helplessness, and they can take to a zone of getting more suicidal ideations or suicidal thoughts, and that a more it is which means that we need to intervene there and do something more acutely.
Great. So that's great. Now I'm going to, this question is going to be to both of you, Dr. Saroja and Dr. Sasi. This is a question that was put in again. It's something that comes again and again with people in lockdown. How do you increase your focus when you are working online, doing housework and homeschooling all at the same time?
Dr. Saroja wants to answer.
I was going to say, I think it's going to have to be a very concerted effort, depending on who we are talking here. I presume sometimes with very young children, the responsibility of homeschooling inevitably falls to the mother, more so to the mother than to the father. I'm sorry, I'm generalizing, don't get offended. And so it comes back to really finding the time to relax and not allow these things to get to you by having a very strict structured program. You know, for example, people, when you want to have some free, me time, if you like, for the person who is feeling the stress, to have that me time first thing in the morning. to mentally relax, be prepared, plan the day ahead, and really compartmentalize as best as you can. I know it is very variable, very flexible, very elastic, more of, less of. And inevitably, as I said, with the 4 areas of life, quite often, sadly, what happens is leisure activities are the ones that suffer the most. Next will be the social, and that social means face-to-face as well as Facebook and YouTube and other things, and the intimate. So finally, you need to have those two, the work and intimate relationships, intimate as in family, immediate family, extended family, and so on. If you prioritize, you can get through that.
Okay, and going on from that, this was again from last week's community forum, the discussion, because children are being homeschooled and then they have access to devices after that, they just continue to use. What is your experience with the tensions in the family with the device use amongst not only younger children, but also older, I guess, adults, as well as teenagers?
Again, in my experience, when people have come up with that, it's coming back to, again, fairly strict limitations set on it. No phones, no answering phones at the dining table, so that a good half an hour is spent by the family at the table, if you like, eating together. Good old sayings like a family that eats together stays together. So sort of thing, we are being encouraged to do that. And children will be, again, very, very serious limit setting. And you can use both positive reinforcement if they do something and they stick to what you're asking them to do, or it can be withdrawing some of their perks. So if you do this, you can watch this.
Dr. Sasi, do you have anything to?
I agree with Dr. Saroja said that having those strict compartmentalized things is very important because otherwise it easily goes to it easily can be very stressful, and especially with the COVID ones, people are feeling the high stress, and that's very inevitable to feel that way. But we got those, and you asked about the screen time, and people are spending more time with these devices because they are the only way to get over it is to have those specific times for the studies and specific time for the play. And with all the recent evidences coming, they say that there's not clear-cut evidence whether how much time you can spend on these devices, but what it says is less than 1 hour per day. That's the maximum you can spend on doing any activity like gaming or other sort of social media sort of things. Because the problem is now we do all the homeschooling in the media in with the thing. So that becomes a gray area now. But still, the 1 hour time for gaming and a social thing should be followed. Otherwise, what they say is your brain gets more irritable and you lose concentration and focus. Okay. So as Dr. Saroja said, the ways to do that, I think we can do that. If we can do that, that'll be good. Yeah.
So this is a question coming from about regarding the stresses that are purely external, like in the external atmosphere, nothing to do with your family, nothing to do with relationships or anything internal within you or so on. So I guess a good example is the coronavirus pandemic. You know, when something like this happens, how do you cope with the uncertainty, with the fears of catching the virus, the fears of being in hospital, you know, when it's completely external, some things you do not have control over. How can you, again, this is a question to both of you, manage the stress from that?
I think the first thing is, as you said, it's a stress which comes from outside. It's like the pandemic, which is a stressful situation for everyone. The thing is, first of all, accepting it. The acceptance itself is a big relief. And unless you accept the things, you can't proceed further. So this is a thing which is stressful for everyone. And that's acceptance plays a greater role. And once you accept it, then you move forward. And then lowering your expectations. In these sort of situations, the expectations, we can't have very high expectation, but at least we can do what we can do now. So those are the two things I think which will help to alleviate that external thing, because we are not like, even if the COVID situation wasn't there, we could have all sat together and had a different type of conversation.
Yes, we could have. Yes.
Yeah, that would have been much delightful. But
Yes.
we have lowered it and we are producing it as in this medium. So in this way, if we are thankful for this medium, I think that's the other way. You flip the coin round and look at things, and you get accepted, and you develop that acceptance and be grateful for what we have now. So instead of looking at the COVID as a more negative aspect, and if you think that, if you feel that you're more grateful for being here in Australia rather than in some other parts of the world and getting more affected, you get a different perspective of things.
Sure.
Can I quickly one thing? I think the important thing is, as we are saying, some of the external things are beyond our control. So there's no point in focusing on them, but rather, given the situation as it is, what is the best I can do? Maybe they're wearing the mask, keeping the distance, keeping the going out to the grocery shop to the minimum, whatever. Those things are very important. And can I add one more to your two words that you used? My motto that I often have a discussion with the people I used to see for problems before is accept your limitations. Limit your expectations, and not just yours, others' expectations. Because sometimes you expect things from other people and they don't do what you would like them to do. The third one is almost always, which is the impossible, some people say, expect there'll always be some unacceptable things. Because there are. But if you expect them, at least you're prepared for them.
Yeah. I think that's the main thing. We can't go with the view that everyone has the same values as us and will behave the same way as us. And then we get surprised when they do not. And we get disappointed. But the reality is we are all unique in our own way, and we do not necessarily share same values. And therefore, it shouldn't be a surprise to us, but we are always surprised. That's the beauty of our mind, that we're always surprised going, why did they behave like that? But because they are different, they do not have to, accustomed to our value system. So just another question again, this is particularly from a participant from Darwin. He's talking about sufferings of Aboriginal people in Darwin. He like watching, because they are a bit more prominent in the streets there. And is there any suggestions that for the government employees who are trying to help the First Nations people who are not in the best of situations?
Again, Australia in 2021 is what it is. And all I can add to it is 52 years ago, or 50, whatever, it was very different. I mean, it's shocking as I read more about Aboriginal history that things were happening. So unfortunately, they are in a similar position sometimes of people in Africa, South America, India, so many other places where opportunities haven't been given to them for various reasons. I'm not going to go into the politics or economics of that, but I think it is rather sad. But again, it's coming back to what is it that you can do? If each of us did what we could, many people who are setting us some beautiful organizations to help and, reframe some of those things and add to that is the best we can do. See, that's a limitation at the moment. We can worry about all those things, but what can we do? And going back to what Dr. Shashi was saying earlier, we need to reframe. I mean, COVID is one of the best examples at the moment. Look at us, we are getting ingenious. We are reaching many more people in the 1 hour today than the three of us combined, if we were working. So, there are lots of positive things. And so people have to learn to focus more on the positives, however little they are, however minor they are.
Yeah. Dr. Sasi?
I don't have much experience with Aboriginal. So the one thing I can say is, especially in Northern Territory, I understand that there's a lot of Aboriginal people there. And I think the government is doing their level best to reach out to them and help them and do everything. So it's the local community, how they accept it and how they those interventions, that's important. And sometimes there could be a barrier between the government and the people, and that barrier could be helped with using the local people, the local Aboriginal service to address the like what we have now, like the groups we have for the Indian community. So they can have the groups which can form a bridge between the government and the services. But I'm sure that doing the best to help them and to reach the point. Yes. Yep.
Okay, so now I think Dr. Saroja mentioned some, one of our registrants asking about some user-friendly resources or apps that people in the Indian community can, in Australia, can use. Have you got some suggestions?
I think the most important thing is with Google on hand, all you have to do is you put in relaxation response and it'll come up with the whole history of it. Who started it, who coined the term, what are the 4 important ingredients, which is basically finding a quiet place, sitting quite comfortably, finding a quiet place, setting aside a time when you don't listen to the phone or anything, breathing, pranayama. All the Indian community has heard that word many, many times. And because these are some of the passive activities that help immediately. As I said, it is totally the opposite of fight or flight. What it does, as we've seen from Dr. Shashi, the evidence is growing every day that it helps the whole body and mind system. So simple things that can be done at 10 o'clock in the night. You can't say, I want to go jogging because that's the only thing that relaxes me. 10 o'clock in the night, dark, cold, raining. You can't do it, but you can do your breathing exercise.
Yeah. So the 2 apps that I use with my patients quite a lot, they're both free. One is the Smiling Mind. You might see a lot of kids, if you have children, they're in the primary school system, the Smiling Mind app is something that they do with their teachers. And the other is one called Respire. It's just a simple breathing app. It helps, young children to understand the breathing because they don't know how to relax. Breathing is a very good way for young children, which I found that app to be very useful. I'm just going to type that in the chat right now. The next question I think is more for Dr. Sasi. This is a question registrants asking about how do you support someone through anxiety and depression? What can you do? What can family do for them?
Well, there are, first of all, for getting the diagnosis is important. So the person, if they feel that they're not well and they have to first contact their GP, and the GP, most of the GPs are comfortable and many GPs are trained in mental health, and they can come to that diagnosis very well. And if they think that that needs further intervention, they can refer to the psychiatrist or not. And the other things which the GP can do would be referring you to a psychologist or a counselor to get further treatment for those if that alone will be sufficient. And I think we are very fortunate that the government has given us now 20 free visits to see the psychologist. Completely free visits to see the psychologist, and especially during this COVID times. And so these are the good ones which has happened during this COVID times. And sometimes when the psychological intervention might not be sufficient, in that case, then we might need to add on some medications. It depends on case-by-case basis. So the first starting point is to see your family doctor. That will be the right starting point there.
So that 20 sessions that's given by, we have to thank coronavirus for that, because there was only 10 sessions before. They've increased it to 20, and it's done given through telehealth as well. But it's not technically free. A lot of psychologists do charge a surcharge or a gap payment, but there are a lot of, I think Dr. Saroja was always bulk billing, which is wonderful. So there are some bulk billing psychologists as well. And there's lots of internet telehealth psychologists only. I just wanted to add in the question about another website that's very useful. Thanks to Dr. Sindhu, who mentioned there's a This Way Up. It's an online website which gives us a lot of course for teen mental health and more information on anxiety, depression, and even chronic pain. I tend to use that as well. Now, the next question was particularly about children. So with children, how do you recognize stress in children and to manage it? Might point out Dr. Saroja is an adult psychologist, but we can do what we can.
I think, should I answer?
Yeah, both of you.
So the presentation in children could be slightly different from the adults. And as Dr. Saroja pointed out, the words which children might sometimes use, like stress, and when the parents fighting with each other, arguing with each other, could sometimes they might feel distress and they're saying the right word, or they might be inappropriately using it. But they can come and tell you that I'm stressed, I'm tensed, or I'm irritable or frustrated, and all these things are signs of stress. And the other thing is which they can normally present with like stomach pains.
Mm-hmm.
They feel like can't go to school, and they say they get up in the morning and they say, oh no, I don't, on a Monday morning I got severe tummy pain again, and I can't be able to go to school. So that's if it happens once a while, that's fine. But if it's going to happen repeatedly, or it comes with a headache or a body aches here and there, then you have to suspect whether this there's any psychological issue on the background of this physical problem.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the starting point is if it's happening repeatedly, you take your child to a GP, and then it takes and it'll go from there. I think Dr. Saroja can also answer, even though she's an adult psychologist. So these are the things. So the children presentation could be slightly different from the adult one. So we need to be keeping that. You have to be cognizant of those things.
Dr.
Yes.
Saroja?
I think the important thing is I do get adults who come in with the problem with their children.
Yes.
So
yes.
that's how I present. A couple of things, just commonsensical things. Quite often, withdrawal behavior is very, very common. Unfortunately, it gets interpreted as he's a very quiet boy. She's always very shy, and left at that. Why? We have to ask. Second thing is when we were training, we were told there were 3 questions we always needed to ask. For who was it a problem? Was it a problem for the child, or for the parent, or for the teacher? Mm. Because all 3 perspectives are different. Mm. So we need to really do that, have a good assessment of what's going on. And because the children who are hyperactive, for example, will get taken to the doctor, a pediatrician, very quickly. The child who is very withdrawn or not as socially, perhaps even socially anxious. So, seriously, anyone who is showing serious signs of social anxiety before the age of 10, mm-hmm. it correlates very highly with serious mental health problems later on in life. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the first 10 years are very important, because, part of my research was on that, about working on. So it is very, very important. The correlation is very, very clear there. So we need to address that as young children. Yeah. Really work out what it is that it is concerning them. The parents, a counselor or a psychologist or clinical psychologist who sees them as a family therapist, they're better trained to pick up and perhaps make suggestions and give more strategies.
Sure. It's true. The anxiety in the child can worsen the anxiety in the parent, and it's a vicious cycle. I have seen that. One of the examples I've seen with a child was she was in her preschool, like a year 1, and she kept presenting with what they thought was UTIs, a urinary tract infection, because she kept going to the bathroom. But actually it was, as Dr. Sasi was talking about, it's irritable bladder. Okay, and one of the best ways I managed, because she's not going to understand that she is stressed. She didn't like the idea of going to the bathroom at school, so she would hold and so on. So I find the Respire app, the breathing app, is wonderful. And what I said to the mother was, before she goes to the bathroom, she does the breathing exercises. And if she still needs to go to the bathroom, And it worked out really well, that practicing the breathing and because what is she doing? She's practicing the parasympathetic nervous system. The more you practice that, the better you can manage your emotions. So I think irritable bladder is something very common that we don't recognize as a source of stress, particularly in children. Now, I think this is a wonderful question to finish on. I don't know if there's more questions, but the main one is this word, resilience. So how do we develop resilience? I think I got that question. So yes. So what was it? Sorry, I'm just gonna. There was a question on resilience.
Yeah. How do we?
Yeah. So yes. How do you build mental resilience to kind of develop protection? I guess a Teflon coat against life stresses. So to conclude our session, yeah. Both of you.
Again, Shashi, would you like to?
No, Dr. will be the right one to answer that one, these strategies.
No, I think one of the best things to do is really, to me, what resilience means is staying power. And, you know, one of the examples I used many years ago was the movie called Slumdog Millionaire, which showed you exactly how people have resilience, doesn't matter what the circumstances are, or the examples of people surviving concentration camps. It's coming back to building an inner strength, okay? And in a general everyday way, what we are talking about is take time every day to reflect on what's happening, learn from your own mistakes, learn from other people's mistakes, and perhaps from history, in tradition in the world. Everything is there if you care to look at it and apply it. So I'm sure a few of the senior members, if they happen to be listening today, will be very accepting of that, because their issues, their stresses are very different, and they're very different. And that's what they're using, their wisdom, to deal with what's happening, because they are dealing with change, with differences, with a lot of communication problems with youngsters and so on, and multi-generational living, which nobody is used to. So, you know, there's lots of things going on, and that is resilience. When the whole thing happens in its own way, in a conducive way.
I just put it wonderfully well there. And just I want to add on to those things, and that's part of what Dr. Saroja said as well. We need to our Indian community as such is a highly resilient people, and so that knowledge itself it's a big boost for us. And so if somebody wants to learn resilience, and we will be the prototypes for those things. So because we have passed through different stages, and especially people who are migrated, and all those things add up, built on resilience. So we need to understand ourselves. That's first thing, understanding ourselves and understanding others. So that forms a framework for that one. And the second thing is being acceptant, having that acceptance. Some things you can't change, and we don't have to break your head against a rock for those things. And when to go for the battle, they say, when pick up your battles. Those are, because a resilient person is not going to battle for each and everything. The kindness builds on the resilience as well, and the kindness and the love for others. And these things, though these are soft ones, but these are the things which is going to bring up on those resilience which is going to build in that resilience inside you. The kindness, the gratitude, the love, and those are profound ones. So if we can have those features, if we can develop those things, the resilience comes as a byproduct to those things. Yes.
Thanks. So, yep, go on.
I finish with one prayer, which I'm sure you've all heard. It, unfortunately, used to be used a lot in Alcoholics Anonymous, but it's true for everybody, is God, please grant me the serenity, the calmness to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was actually going to mention that. So that's why they say great minds think alike. What I have learned of that wisdom is that the things that I can change, there is only one thing you can change, and that is you. And if you ever watch Kung Fu Panda, I highly recommend that movie. Watch it with your children, because the secret to success is you. Only you can change. No one else can, and no one will. And therefore, please, that's the wisdom. If you ever start to say something, realize, do I have any control over it? No, then leave it. Only thing you can control is you. So that's the most profound thing. So with that, I think I'll conclude. And before I'd like Dr. Rajiv Jairam to for the vote of thanks.
Thanks, Mani, and thanks, Saroja and Shashi. I think it's been such an enthralling session and we've seen so many comments come through that I suppose all of us can virtually put our hands together to thank all the three panelists, Dr. Vani for coordinating it so well, Dr. Saroja for explaining it so nicely at a level that's reaching out to all of us, and Sasi for being able to de-entangle quite a lot of technical jargon and make it palatable in such a way that it I suppose has made all of us feel that this is something that that we can really achieve. That while it is different, while it's an amorphous beast, it's not something that presents to all of us in the same way at the same time, and some of us can deal with it appropriately one day, and another day, a few other things might come up that make it more difficult. So it's not as though one person can deal with it
very informative
well, and another
program.
person that doesn't or isn't able to deal with it. So it is very much state dependent, and it's very much person dependent. And I think all three of you have made it so so easy to understand for all of us. And I on behalf of everyone here, I thank all the three of you. And really sorry couldn't thank you in person owing to the current restrictions, but we shall make up for it. So on behalf of the Health Professionals Network and Friends of India, I heartfelt thanks. And for those that are staying on, thank you so much for staying on. I think this has been a wonderful number of people staying on. It's sort of hit 60 and stayed between 60 and 70 throughout the whole hour. And these are 60 and 70 logins, which means that there could be quite a few per login. So it's well over 100 people being able to gain the knowledge the panelists have given us. And in addition, of course, it's been recorded, so the recording will be available for those that may have missed it. So please feel free to contact any of us. Finally, even though quite a lot has been covered in the hour, it is still scratching the surface, and we regard this as the first in our forays into mental health. And I think that's one thing that all of us will definitely gain in terms of understanding deeper in terms of some of the more sort of major disorders that might affect adults, that might affect people in old age, and that might also affect children and adolescents. And we hope that in the future we might be able to focus on some of these as well. So please keep sending through your suggestions. And once the recording is available, I think Padmanji has questioned. Yes, we will post out the links. Padmanji will let you know. All right, so I suppose that's it from us. We've been able to finish on time as well.
Rajiv, can I just give my vote of thanks from the exec members?
Sure. So the voice that you're hearing is Vijay Sampath. Vijay Sampath is the current president of Friends of India Australia. And yes, Vijay, you're more than welcome to speak. Thank you.
Yeah. Let me take this opportunity to thank these wonderful panel members, Dr. Vani, Dr. Saroja, and Dr. Sasikumar, for giving us their valuable time and knowledge to make this session very informative and very useful, especially for this current situation. Again, thanks for your time.
Welcome.
Yes. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.